Sometimes people do not realize what peace looked like until it disappears from their life. And by the time they understand it, it is usually too late. That is what happens after losing a good person. At first, it does not always feel painful. Sometimes it feels quiet. Sometimes it even feels easier. Less tension, less explanation, less responsibility. The arguments are gone. The pressure is gone. The emotional effort is gone. And for a little while, that can feel like relief, but relief is not peace. Peace is what remains when the mind no longer has to fight itself. And that is where many people begin to struggle, because when you lose a good person, you do not just lose their presence. You lose the emotional balance they brought into your life. You lose the calm that came from being understood. You lose the consistency of someone who cared without making every moment feel like a test. That kind of absence is hard to explain because it does not always show up all at once. It shows up in ordinary moments, a quiet evening, a meal eaten alone, a message they almost send, a room that feels different even though nothing inside it has changed. That is when the mind starts doing something very uncomfortable. It starts comparing, not comparing the relationship to something perfect, comparing the present to the peace that used to exist when you were still there, and that comparison is brutal. Because a good person often becomes the standard without anyone realizing it. They set a rhythm in someone's life. They made things feel easier to understand. They gave emotional stability. They made it possible to be yourself without always protecting yourself first. When that person is gone, the other side often feels something missing before they can name it. They may say, "I am fine." They may say, "This was the right choice." They may say, "I can handle this." But the mind has a way of revisiting what the mouth tries to avoid. And eventually, the same questions return. Was I too quick to leave? Did I take too much for granted? Why does everything feel a little colder now? That is what happens when someone loses a good person and the comfort of your presence begins to echo in places they did not expect. The silence starts to have shape. The space starts to have memory. And the peace they thought would stay begins to disappear from every corner of their routine. A good person changes the emotional weather around them. They do not need to be dramatic to be deeply felt. They do not need to be loud to matter. In fact, the very people who are easiest to overlook are often the ones who leave the biggest void when they are gone. Because they were not trying to control the relationship, they were trying to make it safe. And safe is rare. That is why the loss feels bigger than expected. Because what they are really mourning is not just you. They are mourning the version of life that only existed when they felt emotionally at ease. There is also something else happening underneath the surface. When someone loses a good person, the mind often begins turning inward. It starts replaying not just what happened, but who they became while it was happening. Were they patient enough? Were they honest enough? Did they protect something valuable, or did they let pride make the decisions? That is where guilt lives. Not the kind that explodes, the kind that settles in. It shows up when they are trying to sleep. It shows up in a random memory. It shows up when they hear a song pass a place or remember a conversation that used to feel ordinary. Ordinary moments become hard to ignore once the person who gave them meaning is no longer there. And then the mind does something painful. It starts judging the present through the lens of the past. Every new conversation feels a little flatter. Every new connection feels a little less natural. Every kind gesture feels just a little less grounding than what they once had with you. That is when some people realize too late that peace was not the absence of conflict. Peace was your presence, and once they understand that, it is hard to unsee. This is why some people never fully recover after losing a good person, because their life does not feel like it is just missing a relationship. It feels like it is missing a reference point. They no longer know how to measure emotional safety without you in it. They no longer know what normal felt like when you were the one making things feel steady. That kind of loss creates unfinished thoughts, unfinished gratitude, unfinished apologies, unfinished understanding. And the human mind hates unfinished things. It circles them, it returns to them, it keeps them alive, long after the relationship itself has ended. So if someone seems restless after losing you, it may not be because they hate what happened. It may be because they finally understand the value of what they lost, an understanding that too late can shake a person in ways they did not expect. Because peace is not something people notice every day. They notice it when it is gone. If this message felt familiar, leave one word in the comments: peace. And if you want more honest relationship psychology like this, stay with Heart Whisper.